Welcome to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast. Thanks for joining us on the Journal of Biophilic Design today. We are really excited to be joined by Xander Cadisch. He heads up the independent research arm, Light Tribe of Phos, which is a B Corp and an innovative lighting company who say they illuminate more than just spaces, they ignite change. And he surely does that. Xander, who you can also watch on replay, gave a really interesting talk at our first annual conference at the Barbican in 2024. And you can go to biophilic.conference.com to check that out. He spearheads the research, diving into how biophilic design can help reshape our connection to the natural world and help make spaces and places better for the future. He's also published a book, which I'm going to hold up now for the people who are watching this on YouTube and on our website, journalofbiophilicdesign.com. It's called The Light Within Us. And it says biophilic design, human behavior, and the power of wavelengths, which we're going to be talking about in a minute. And basically, it's exploring how it's a visual treat for a start off, actually. And I'm just going to flick through some of the pages now so people can see them. Very badly flicking through them, actually, but there's like lots of visual stuff. It's a bit like a journal, actually, in a way, because if people like that, they're going to absolutely love this. Pages are very tactile. There's pages that open up as well. But it explores our brains, neuroscience, psychology, technology, and also the inherent need to be connected to good sensory experiences because we are sensory beings. And we're going to be talking about senses today, aren't we, Xander? Well, thanks for joining
We
us.
are indeed. No, pleasure. Thank you. What an introduction as well. Well summarized.
Well, I don't know how I summarize you. You do loads of things, and you are so passionate about this. So I'm really looking forward to speaking with you now, and I'm sure people are going to really enjoy this podcast. So maybe we can start actually by you telling us about a little bit about yourself and about what you do, please.
Yeah, of course. So, where do we start? To be honest, I have no idea how I ended up doing what I do now. When I was younger, I wanted to be a chef. I was always amazed by the fact that a really good meal could immediately give you a little bit more ability to recall those events. If you have a good meal, good Sunday lunch, you can remember that. If you have a rubbish Sunday lunch, you tend to sort of put it to the back of your mind. You don't remember. So, from a really young age, I was amazed by the fact that the senses can really dial up our ability to create lasting memories and basically improve the quality of our life. And I went through the idea of maybe being a chef, decided maybe it's not quite for me, but ended up joining the family company, which is something I sort of never really thought of doing. Had a meeting next door to my family offices and popped in and saw my dad, my brother, my grandpa, my dog. Felt like a setup, to be honest. And they were like, "Oh, you ever thought about lighting?" I was like, "No." And I joined about 3 weeks later and got given a box of lighting products that we manufacture and just went around talking to people about light. And I just was, the ultimate lay individual test subject of the general public not knowing anything and then the lighting world and going in to talk to people about lighting. I just sort of, it's such a hidden topic. And
Mm.
it's the more and more I delved into it, the more I was just like, how are we only doing, 2, 3 lessons at GCSE to do with color and wavelengths and stuff like that. And then it's forgotten forever to the point where a lot of designers don't give it a second thought. So lighting is the first thing to go in any project.
Mm.
And I found it really difficult to explain that the lights that we make are some of the best out there because people just go, yeah, but they're just lights. And I was like, they're not. They're really not. There's so much more to that. So yeah, our company essentially, my role has kind of evolved to be a researcher, so I did a lot of research with universities and sort of have advised the government in various capacities and lecture at universities and obviously at the Journal of Biophilic Design conference to try and get people to understand the power of color, surface, texture, light, and our products are kind of built with that knowledge in mind, using sort of biomorphism, biomimicry, and all these things that I guess we'll get into a little bit during the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's quite weird, isn't it? Because the light is everywhere around us, but we can only see it if light falls on something. So therefore it becomes something. But it
Mm.
really can change an atmosphere. I suppose if people are listening, you think you put candlelight on as opposed to a fluorescent tube. Putting it really simply, it does really make a difference to the space and the atmosphere and how we feel as well.
Well, even when you talk about it, I can feel when you say a nice warm candle, I'm like, ooh.
Yeah.
the fluorescent tube maybe get quite
Exactly.
quite heightened. We feel it viscerally, and it's because of these memories and different intensities of wavelength that make up color and our reactions to that and stuff. So it's a whole, it's an interest that's got way out of hand.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We're gonna talk about all sorts of things, but actually, well, as soon as you've mentioned wavelengths, can you sort of just tell us a little bit about how, about light and about wavelengths, kind of like to get to a lay person if they're listening and kind of might have a bit of an understanding, but not really. Can you kind of like put it really simply?
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is
How's
literally
it
what the whole
work?
book was about. I always describe it as my favorite pub facts about light, and our
Yeah.
way, the way we look at the world around us. So, light is so the Big Bang happened, and electromagnetic radiation sort of pulsed through the universe. You have radio waves that are sort of slow, cumbersome things that help Justin Bieber travel around the world. Then you've got microwaves, which vibrate the same frequency as water, which is why it cooks food. You get infrared, which we experience as heat, and then right next to infrared, which burns our skin, is the color red. So then you go, this long, slow red. Then you go orange, blue. For those listening, I'm sort of making funny pictures with my hand shapes, showing that as you go from red, orange, yellow, green, indigo, blue to violet, the frequency increases. You get like a higher frequency wave. And just beyond the color violet is ultraviolet, which literally strips paintings. So we overlook the fact that color is energy, it's radiation, just like an X-ray or an infrared or an ultraviolet. And we've evolved over millions of years, which is all sort of like nicely summarized in the book. And we've always had these intrinsic links to the rising and setting of the sun and all these different color variations and intensities and wavelengths that the sun gives us at night, at daytime, and then removes at night. We've literally, budded out our eyes to capture this. Our eyes are an extension of our brain. They're like, sort of antenna. They're an antenna that capture all this radiation. And yeah, I think the issue is in the world that we live now. We spend 90% of our time indoors now, which is actually less than 1 hour outside a day. It's less than the legal requirement for maximum security prisoners. So we, with free will, spend more time indoors than the worst criminals out there.
Yeah.
So which is crazy, and we no longer really consider light and radiation and the natural formula of sunshine that we've expected for most of our evolution.
Mm. And I suppose it sort of brings us to like the question of like why nature? Why do we need biophilic design? Obviously you've kind of hinted here that we lived outside. We were living outside all the time. We were used to the circadian rhythm of the colors and the spectrum of light. For you, why nature? Why is biophilic design? Why is this all? Why is it important? Why should people be caring about this?
It's a fitting question for the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast.
Absolutely.
No, I think there's a lot of reasons, really. I mean, for me, going out and looking at biophilic design, I think you've done an amazing job at explaining the kind of, there's that cliche of the why.
Mm.
Why biophilic design? A lot of people believe that it's just putting plants indoors, and it's such a, particularly during lockdown, I saw so many photos of people putting plants in their bathrooms and going, "Oh, hashtag biophilic design." It's not that at all. It's texture, it's shape, it's layout, it's flora. It's so much more than just making stuff green. And for me, I felt the missing piece of the conversation was the science behind the why. So I
Mm.
go around and talk to loads of architects, interior designers, and lighting designers, and a lot of them are aware of biophilic design, but it's putting the logic behind practicing biophilic design, and that's what, explanation of us within the realms of nature does so well to get people to click and go, biophilic design is actually, it makes so much sense and all this kind of stuff. So why nature? We are nature. We evolved outside for millions and millions of years, and in the blink of an eye, we're now indoors in artificial places where majority of spaces are painted brilliant white, which is one of the only colors not found in nature. Everything is polished. We have no texture. Nothing in nature is flat. It's all knobbly and bobbly and kinked and sort of, we've removed the richness from the environments in which we live. And by looking to nature, you can essentially just replicate conditions that we expect to experience and the benefits in every single sector of the economy, hospitality, hospitals,
Mm.
classrooms, residential, restaurants, just by mimicking nature and putting your bodies in conditions which they expect, you can improve the health, well-being, performance, and happiness of every single person, which is, it's not rocket science when you start looking at why does it work? Because we're nature.
Yeah, because it's part of us. Yeah, we are it and it is us. And yeah, just like
Exactly.
it should be seamless. But as you say, we cut ourselves off and shut ourselves inside boxes. And, that's kind of it, really. Um,
Like
uh, yeah, yeah.
shutters inside boxes.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, actually, I was going to ask you about the book in a minute. And actually how light enters our eyes, but it just sort of sparked a question. From designer's point of view. I mean, I know personally, you spend a lot of time outside in nature. You do a lot of natural stuff. You kind of, you connect yourself to nature on your holidays or adventures or whatever it is. And I do too. I live like that quite frequently, and I go into the forest. I take myself off. It's just because how I am, and that's how I'm wired. Do you think there's kind of maybe a disconnect between some designers, or maybe not even just a disconnect, but something that we should be encouraging? Maybe more designers, architects, anyone who's in, or even in specifiers, or people who are in control of the budget and, the contractors and all that, that there's actually a case for encouraging a biophilic way of life amongst designers and everyone that will then filter down into design principles and actually changing our built environment.
So I think there's a couple of things in that. The first being, it's an amazing book which Karen owns.
Mm,
Shout out, Karen, if you're listening. Gave me a suggestion to read. It was brilliant. It's called The Eyes of the Skin.
mm,
And it talks about this, the author, I forget his name, I should remember it, but he draws a parallel between the evolution of technology and the devolution of texture. So
mm,
as we've stopped drawing we're sketching and drawing our buildings and spaces with pencil and feeling that, that graphite going against the paper and that sound and the feeling of it vibrating up your pencil into your hand. And
yeah,
we're now CADing stuff and it's all on iPads and iMacs and flat screens. And you can see a direct correlation between the amount of polished buildings, glass,
yeah,
as we've removed our connection to the texture whilst we draw, we're removing the texture from our building. So I think answer part one to your question, I think, would be just by changing the way in which we draw and design our spaces in our offices can actually have a knock-on effect to improve the level of complexity that we then apply to the building. Also, I think that one of the biggest things is education. It's sort of a lot of people hear about, biohacking, and it's a trigger word which I hate, frankly, because it's so misunderstood. I think, the whole, oh yeah, you need blue light. No, don't use blue light last thing at night, so people are looking at their phone screens and going, the blue light's going to keep me up for ages. There's just a lot of misinformation. I think the reality is that when you start to explain how we evolved to live, then you can kind of connect with the reasoning behind needing to be outside, when you then make a deliberate ploy every morning to go and do that and spend an hour doing your emails on your phone when you're taking a walk around instead of just sitting in your sofa, and the visceral effect over just 3 days of doing that is so good that you kind of go, ah, it makes sense. And when you can join the two together,
mm,
that from a personal perspective, when I made that connection, that was when on the grey days when I was struggling to get outside, I'd be like, just go. You know you need this and you will feel infinitely better. It's making logic out of fact, right? It's kind of that reverse engineering it, and that's kind of the thing I think is slightly missing.
yeah, cool.
So if
I
they can
like
kind
that.
of
Yeah.
get outdoors and feel the benefit, and I think it intrinsically improves your connection to nature and your respect for bringing that inside.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. And it's really interesting, the whole writing and drawing and that connection, the sort of mechanical thing that we're doing, but the feeling of the pencil on the paper. I mean, obviously I sketch, but going outside and sketching and all this kind of bringing all these things, this kind of more a slower way of being as well, and a more sensory way of living, I think is really important, which is obviously what your book is all about. So we can revert, nice segue back to the book. Can we actually talk about how light sort of enters our brains. You explained this incredibly well at the conference, and everybody came away going, "Oh my God, I get light." I've obviously forgotten it since. So
So there was a lot on at that conference. It's
it
a good problem
was.
to have.
Yeah. Can you explain how it works? Kind of how it gets into our brains?
Yeah, so we trying to work out how far back to go. I find all of this fascinating, so sorry if I ran, but if I do, just click your fingers and tell me to come back to the room. So we learned to see underwater, and light was sort of the evolution of the eye. What basically we developed this retina. It's like a flat pad that worked up when light was on and when it was off. And when light was on, it would sort of be a signal for us to get going. It'd be like an engine starting for the day. Um, then eventually, I'll sort of skip part of this explanation, more of it's in the book, but eventually we went, oh, let's go onto land because we could see lots of food that was up for grabs. So we sort of wibbled out of the sea, that's the technical term. And because we'd used seawater to keep our eyes hydrated, we had to bring that same saltiness, salinity with us. So our tear ducts are essentially recreating salt water that are the first conditions that our eyes learn to see. So I always think it's a nice, I would say it's one of my favorite pub facts, but it's the permanent physical reminder in every single one of us about how long we have evolved to connect with light and how important wavelengths landing on our eyes are to the point where we've literally brought the sea with us to live our land adventure. Um, Anyway, so sunlight then enters your eye, and you have rods and cones. So cones are for color, rods are for sort of nighttime vision. Um, yeah, essentially they determine red, green, and blue. The light hits those sort of rods and cones, and your brain is able to decipher sort of color, texture, spatial awareness, and stuff. And there's sort of what's interesting is a lot of people overlook the fact that a lot of the processing of light is non-visual. And so you have your visual, which is just immediate zoom, but so much of the information that goes into your head is digested and put into rules and helping you predict the world around you. Classic example is when you're in London or any city with an escalator and you go up to one where the escalator's stopped, you kind of take two steps and immediately you kind of stumble over, you kind of go, ooh, and it's because your brain goes, escalators move. That's an easy shortcut based on the data that's entered our eye through light to help you understand the world around you more effectively. So, there's a huge amount of digestion and processing and understanding about the wavelengths when they enter your eye that helps us make sense of the world around us. And actually, the earliest theories of sight were that we had these tentacles that kind of reached out and touched the world around us. We've always known that we have this ability to feel texture with our eyes. Um, they actually know that there's something now called synesthesia, which is the blending of the senses. So, some people have the ability to smell sound or to hear color. So, yeah, so you can see, you can feel color through your eyes, you can feel texture. And that happens at the visual cortex. So, light enters your eye and it gets processed in your visual cortex, which is shaped like a funnel. And the more complicated an object is, the more texture you're going to get sort of through the processing of the neurons. So if you look at sort of like a lovely textured wall, the light goes into your eye and your visual cortex goes, oh, there's quite a lot to digest here, and it lights up. You literally can see the neurons firing. If you look at a flat polished wall, you like your visual cortex goes, well, that's quite easy to understand. And just goes boop, lights up. So you can see in MRI machines, the more complex and textured the objects are, the more objective pleasure that you get from those environments. So, objectively speaking, in the built environment now, we don't have much texture. Everything's polished. So we're removing the ability to actually enjoy the spaces that we live in. And the one final part, which I think is interesting about the way that we see, is Professor Russell Foster discovered these cells on the very sort of on your retina called interphotoretinal ganglion cells. It's a bit of a mouthful, IPRGs, but they respond to blue light. So blue light, when it enters your eye, hits these cells, and short version is it creates cortisol in your body. So
Okay.
actually, a blue wavelength can create the same amount of cortisol as a double espresso. So, which is crazy, right? So you go outside first thing in the morning, you get that dose of blue light into your eyes, and your body goes, okay, it's daytime. Here's your cortisol shot, like a key turning an engine on for the day. and you kickstart your day. So yeah, I mean that's the sort of overarching way of responding to the world around us. But it's essentially just sort of yeah a multi-layered evolutionary response to the world around us.
Fantastic. That's absolutely brilliant. So interesting. And I'm probably going to have to replay that a couple of times so that I get it in my head.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a bit of a silly question, but why is light important to us as humans? What is it that about light that obviously that's essential for us? I mean, so obviously so we can see and we don't fall over stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And I suppose it's survival and all that kind of thing. But why is light important? I mean, you kind of obviously sort of intimated there about, waking us up in the morning and presumably like sending us to sleep at night. But why is it important to us?
Yeah, well, it's sort of, our eyes are the window to the world. It's a lovely expression that sort of gets thrown around the lighting industry a fair bit. And it's, light, without light, we can't see anything. And it turns down every single one of our senses.
Mm.
So there's an example where if you use more red light at lower levels than a restaurant, you can get diners to eat more desserts.
Uh-huh.
It can make you more susceptible to sweets. If you use a particular type of purple, it can make you more creative. If you use a particular type of red, it can help your collagen generate. So light is one of the main guiding forces to the world around us. It's sort of some suggest that 80% of how we interact with the world around us comes from what we see.
Mm.
So these rhythms of night and day and expectations of texture and fractal patterning, which is sort of the law and order that nature has conjured up to create beautiful textures in a way that's familiar. It all comes from being able to see. But actually, in the built environment, often what happens with legislation being passed by government ministers that don't really understand anything. And then contractors who are just focused on getting the job done and that kind of stuff. We all have our priorities. Lots of spaces are overlit.
Mm.
Actually, one of the biggest things is shadowing and contrast. Nature isn't just illuminated with a floodlight. It's got lovely shadows and bright spots and dark spots, and that's the kind of contrast that nature gives us. And again, how important is light? Well, it's really important, but the absence of light is also as important. It's that kind of yin yang balance to create that harmony that nature's managed effortlessly over millennia.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we can look at actually biophilic design and sort of biophilic design, lighting, sensory design. We can talk about sound and all that kind of things. And your book actually goes into so many different aspects of the senses. Again, it's brilliant, and I do recommend people. Actually, I've just opened the book randomly, and another pub fact. I do like the fact that the book is full of pub facts. A particular pink wavelength can physically weaken individuals by up to 35%. I do like that. I do like that. Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, it's Baker Miller Pink, which is it's a Norwich City Football Club actually painted their away changing room in that pink. So all their opponents, all their opposition at half time was sat in this room that was making them weak. It actually got banned in sport. But again, it's why goalkeepers will wear electric blue, electric yellow, electric pink. So when the person's trying to score a goal one
Yeah.
on one, there's a bit of a shock to your revolutionary expectation. You're like, that's not normal green, and you hoof it over the bar kind of thing. But we know that we respond to color. It's blue can calm your heart rate down, red can speed it up, green can flick between the two. So it's we're quite predictable beings, really. You can
Yeah.
influence positively people using sort of like knowledge based
Yeah.
design.
So how would that manifest itself then in the built environment? So you're talking about these colours, and obviously you mentioned about Norwich Football Club using
Yeah.
that and this being the Baker thingy pink. But how does it manifest, or how should it be manifesting itself in the built environment? What should we be looking at? What should we be considering? How should we be doing it better?
Well, I think I mean, there's a huge subject. It's also one of my favorite parts. There's a brilliant woman called Karen Haller, who I think you've met possibly. You might have met her at the launch anyway, but she's a color psychologist, and she's really not. She's the one that sort of inspired me on the color psychology side of stuff. And if we actually start really tapping into ourselves, we can kind of work out the colors that we like. So this is my I got to paint one room in the house. This is what I chose. I chose blue, my working room, and I know that that is a muted, calm space for me to be in my, working environment. That's what I need. It's the calm, the focus. And I chose this blue instinctively, and then I read an article about the fact that blue-black is associated with calm and quiet and nighttime, and yellow is daytime, lively, this, that, and the other. And our corridor is about to be painted yellow because of exactly that. I want to get home and be like, yes. Um, but in terms of how do we apply that to the built environment, I think it's about sort of just appreciating the fact that texture and color have a real influence on us, and it's really overlooked. And in order to lift those textures and the colors, you need vibrant color rendering. So, if you think about the way that color works, you get light bouncing off an object and reflecting into our eye, and the light that reflects into our eye is the color that object appears. What happens is most LEDs now just have blue, so
Mm.
you end up with all these lovely, woods and leathers that people have spent thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds on, looking black and devoid of any kind of real life. So it's crazy. And then they go, oh, well, we'll just put a £10, Sainsbury's light in the ceiling, and you're like, well, that's now going to look like, a £1 chair as opposed to, so it's the whole respect for the wavelengths that help us lift the radiation into our eyes and enjoy it, and also positioning lights in a way that lifts the texture off the walls. And so often if I look at a ceiling plan, a lighting designer will come in and change it, and it's interesting seeing the difference between an interior designer and an architect's version of lighting design, because it's just functional. You do one light every 1 meter until the room is lit, and that's where you end up with a floodlit space. But they have to be masters of everything and not specifically in on one. So when a lighting designer comes in and they go, right, you need half the amount of lights, let's put one right up against the wall to lift that texture and create that beautiful contrast in that stone. And that's when the magic happens. And the best lighting designers out there, um, some of the best that I've met, tend to have come from theatre as
Okay.
well. Theatre lighting. So you go, right, I understand that light is the storyteller. You know what to look at and how, and then everything else kind of falls into second nature. So color, surface, texture, in
Mm.
answer to your question, is the sort of the key ways of bringing in considerations into the built environment.
Yeah, that's lovely. As you said about theatre and light and storytelling. I mean, I'm a photographer, and I sort
Mm,
of cut my teeth, and I've done Pavarotti and all that. But on the stage, for me, I think that's what I love about photography. Obviously, photo light and graphos meaning light, and it's actually you're painting with light with the camera, and it's
mm,
just that. And I
I
think
love that.
maybe that's just why I'm a bit more sensitive as well to how you light and lighting angles. And because in the theatre, like you just said, and when people, people are thinking about lighting a space, if they do take themselves off to see something like the Medea or, something really dramatic, like, the Scottish play, which I can't mention the name, obviously. Mind you, I'm not in a green room, so maybe I can. But you've got this really drama lighting, and that really sort of like informs how we feel. I mean, as well as the music, of course. I mean, the music informs, but again, it's senses, isn't it? Sound and things and soundscaping, but
Mm,
lightscaping a space. And I like that. I like that. So taking it another level is actually you can tell a story in a space, I suppose. You can let the building, the room, tell its story. So
mm.
the designers can talk to each other really and kind of really create that space.
It's 100% it. And the other, sorry to sort of to interrupt you on it, but we did a really interesting, so Light Tribe, which is our kind of, so our company's called Phos. Light Tribe is our independent research arm. And we did an interview with Dr. Shelley James, who's an amazing sort of inspiration in my world into lighting. And the creative director, I think, of Dulux Paint, Marianne Shillingford. And she said what was really interesting is the number of paints sold before COVID by Dulux tended to be heavily muted, calm, whites, greys, beiges palettes in London, because people would have all the hustle and bustle of outside, and they'd come home and want peace.
Yeah.
And then when COVID happened, the sales of oranges, earthy greens, and all the natural colors went up a lot because people weren't getting that stimulation, but without really understanding why, they knew they needed some form of radiation that mimicked nature, and they
Yeah.
would bring it into their homes because they couldn't get it from nature. And I think that's a really nice way of explaining the power of color and light and the importance of good light to lift those colors as well. We know we need it because the data speaks for itself. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I like that. You said, they needed that radiation. And you mentioned before about light being radiation or being like rays, kind of thing. And if you
Mm,
think of it like that, you have a different mindset on light, don't you? Really? It's not
100%.
just about, yeah, it's not just about a light bulb and just sticking it in, and but actually, yeah. Hmm. There's like lots of things to think about here. So if as a lighting aficionado yourself,
You're
that's
saying it, not
that's you.
me. But yeah.
That's you, darling. That's you.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. What tips would you give our listeners? Some of them, and there's designers. There are architects actually listen to it. There's landscape architects, so outside. Maybe we
Mm,
could. I mean, we could have a look at a couple, but so maybe we could look at inside, and then maybe we could also look at outside. I mean, I'm so like passionate about how we should light outside, like we shouldn't be lighting outside, or we should be lighting it very sensitively because it's killing all the bloody insects.
yeah.
That's another thing. So we park that a minute. But actually, how should it be? What advice would you give people? That's it. I'm waffling. I'll let you do that. I'll let you do
No,
the
that's all right.
walk.
Let me waffle. Let me waffle.
Yeah, let you
Professional at
waffle.
it. So sort of how to light in inside spaces or
Yeah, or just what. I mean, you've given by sort of default, you've given loads of tips about texture and color and lighting and sort of thing. But if people are listening, what would you I don't know, what five things would you tell people you should be doing or you shouldn't be doing? You should, make sure you do this or make sure you avoid that. What sort of just a few tips really that people can go, okay, I'll do that next time, my next design or my next, it might even in their own home or in a school or a hospital or something. What should they be
Hmm. Well, I think I mean I can never pretend to be a lighting designer. There's that arm takes years and years and years of training and implementing it into beautiful CADs and the real lived experience of creating details and things like that. What I can say is what I've seen lighting designers do, where I've gone wow, and I'm
doing?
close to projects where a lot of lighting designers have been involved. I think one of the first is sort of embedding lighting as part of your design early on. So
Yeah.
often, what happens is they go, okay, cool. So we've got the layout, we've got the holes in the ceiling. Okay, what do we need now? Light. Okay, lighting designer. Right. Can you do something with that? And they're like, you've already done it. There's not, the magic has been lost because when you start getting a lighting designer in at the beginning, they
Mm,
can embed light into architectural details. And the real magic of a space is when you don't really know how it's been lit.
mm,
It's that sort of like intangible beauty that is sort of, I mean, I love the expression that light is where science meets art
mm.
in the way
Yes.
that you even make it happen. It's hardcore science to grow an LED on a substrate and then have a phosphor and then get rid of the heat. But actually, the artistic flair of bringing it right up against a polished concrete wall and then leaving that whole 3 meter gap to that little alcove
Mm,
where a little candlelight is completely barren. And
mm,
that's when you walk in and go, ooh, do you know what I mean? That's the real magic. Alternatively, if you get the lighting designer in at stage 5 of the Reba process, where basically everything's in, and you have 4 lights in a square in the ceiling, you just got like a really well lit floor. So but those are the sort of the contrast, right? It really is the difference is art and then just like function. It's just such a so I think the first thing is get lighting designers in early. Next would just be the quality of the light. Have something with vibrant color rendering. Um, I think I mean, flicker as well is a big one. So LEDs don't turn on or they don't dim. Sorry.
yeah.
So halogens, you just reduce the current going through and the coil sort of glows less brightly so you can dim down, almost like turning the sun down, right? Works in a similar way. LEDs you have to turn on and off very, very quickly. And that's why when you video a TV or a room with bad lighting, you'll see it flickering on your phone. That is actually happening, but your brain is working incredibly hard to remove that flicker, which tires you out. And yeah, I think having a conversation with, again, either use a lighting designer because they will be able to ask the right questions, or speak to a manufacturer about how to remove flicker.
Yeah.
Because if you put flicker into a space, you can get headaches, migraines, epilepsy in worst cases. But yeah, it's the hidden, I call it the devil's work in the lighting world. But um, and then I think it's just about less is more.
Hmm.
Uh, And one of the big things for us is finishes. I think my theory or my belief is that we've lost the richness of the environments that nature give us. Textures, fractal patterning, dynamic light, basically slowly naming the 15 principles of terrapin, which is biophilic principles that are scientifically proven to help people be happy and healthy. But I think, yeah, I think it's very important to try and blend artificial objects into an environment in a way that is natural, and that's by shape and color and texture, and that's literally what we try and do. We're fully photo. We can do concrete, sandstone, oxidized brass, and we've got something like a million possible finishes. It's actually ridiculous, but the whole thing is, it's our belief system is we are nature, nature is us. Let's try and create organic fittings that happen to have, it's where science meets art. It's
Mm.
that balance of, nature versus function. That's the kind of that's the inspiration. Wasn't quite five, but
Yeah, no, that's really great. No, really lovely. I like that. Where it's sort of science meets art. I think that's a beautiful fusion. I think that's a nice takeaway actually for people to think about. Um, I just goes back to the book actually, and there are some case studies in the back, and there are some lovely examples. And again, I do encourage people to have a look, and I'll put a link on the spiel that goes with the podcast. Xander, if you give me where to send them to, because I think it's a beautiful book, and it's one that you should have on your shelf because it just looks beautiful because of the spine. Again, I'm holding it up again for people to as a reminder because I'm giving it a tap. It's a
proof of the
hardback and it's
hardback.
beautiful.
Yeah.
It is actually lovely. You've done a really phenomenal job, and I know it's been a complete labor of love, personal labor of love for you because it's been from your heart. So,
A
um,
few people my end as well. I mean, my internal graphic designer as well. Her sanity was quite close to none by the end of it.
oh,
Yeah,
oh,
she's been
I
amazing.
can't imagine that for a moment, Xander. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I want it like this. One of the projects is in there as a Spears Major light architecture, and it's a case study. And I really love how it explores light to be used for like wayfinding. Yeah, again, we mentioned about storytelling, but focus and transformation of a space. Do you have an example maybe that you could share that maybe people go and have a look at, whether it's online or whatever, if they're like listening to this in Australia or wherever it is, or even anywhere. But is there somewhere that people could go and have a look at that you think, do you know what, they've really nailed lighting as an example?
Yeah, I do. I mean, my go-to is always Granary Square in King's Cross,
Oh yeah, yeah.
which is absolutely stunning. I mean, it used to be kind of just what all of London was like. It was just boom,
Mm,
there you go. It's a big open area, have some Stasi interrogation light, and we all just sort of, you know, got lost in the chaos that was that square of activity and hive of busyness.
mm,
And I think it was Spears that did it, or it was Hawley, who are also in the book actually as well. They've got a really brilliant case study as well. They started again, lighting design was brought in very early on in the redevelopment. They started integrating diffused light, so indirect, soft light that was hidden in the architecture of the benches
okay.
and things like that. And it just meant that everything kind of glowed, but in a way where you couldn't see the light source. It was low, it is low and it is soft. And when you go there now, there's just like I kind of find myself actually moving at a slower pace there.
Yes.
It's kind of amazing. You come out of King's Cross Station, it's in Pancras side, and you've got the German bar, and it's sort of a swing, and you've got the taxi rank, and people rushing for trains. You're like, oh God, this is intense. And then you go through, and there's the restaurant bits. You're like, okay, it's a bit calmer now. Actually, this is quite nice. And then you get to that square, and it just feels like you can slow down, take a breath. They've got water, which has got lights in it. It feels playful.
Mm,
It's one of my favorite places in London, and
mm,
it's just so beautifully considered, and it's because it's just like small amounts of light in the right place, the right quantity at the right time, and in the right wavelength, which is you kind of you mentioned it as well as LEDs are little crystals that pump out blue light. Blue light, as we spoke about at the beginning of the podcast, is the opposite end of red, really. It's not that slow wavelength, it's high intensity, which is why the world went LEDs are good for efficiency because it's, per unit of power, you get far more energy, which is in a higher blue form. But that blue wavelength, which all lights now run off, um, attracts insects, and that attracts all the bats, and the owls attract kill all the bats, and yeah, it's a biodiversity nightmare. It's something called the bluing effect, where if you land on an airplane to any airport near a city, you'll see a sort of big blue dome. It wouldn't really have been there before the advent of the LED, and it's because these high frequency wavelengths can pinball all the way around a city as opposed to stopping after, you know, 4 or 5 meters.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, Granary Square is amazing because it's just lovely orange red wavelengths, about 1800, 2000 Kelvin in soft ambient spots, and your eyes adapt. You know, they're like a camera, so they kind of, you don't need a huge amount of light. You only need about sort of like 10 lux or something, which is a measurement of light to still be able to see pretty well. So yeah, that would be my suggestion is look at that for inspiration because it's just less is more.
Yeah, lovely. And there's good coffee there as well. So
Really
it's
good coffee.
a good
Yeah.
reason to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before I ask you the final question, Xander, is there anything else you'd like to add at this point? Anything at all?
No, I mean to be honest, it's I think what you're doing is brilliant. I think the approach to, being the first person to really start championing biophilic design in the form of a pretty gutsy conference that you put on. And it went down so well in the aftermath of everything is, first
Mm,
of all, thank you for
mm,
everything that you're doing. I think it's brilliant. And I think it's very cool that we're in this. I always think that quite an interesting sort of point to think about really is that architects spend 7 years ish. I'm not an expert on becoming almost doctors of buildings. It's about the same amount of time as doctors learn to become professional medical experts. But from what I understand, there's not a single biology module in their years of becoming experts on providing human habitats.
yeah.
And we put less consideration into the zoos we make for animals than we do houses for humans.
Mm,
And I think designers have, a really exciting opportunity actually to redefine the way in which human beings exist in what is now their new habitat. We spend more time indoors than prisoners. So this is our habitat now, indoors. How do we think about color, surface, texture, spatial layout, human evolutionary requirements to help reassure our sort of like subconscious and make us go, okay, this is fine. There's amazing examples in every sector, as I said, and I might just give you one just to show, particularly, I think it's the most dramatic example, is in an office. They did a study in Sacramento, Sacramento Municipal Utility Building, where there were a load of desks and they were all looking into a building. There was this lovely floor to ceiling window and no one was looking out of it. They were looking into the sort of square box that we shut ourselves in, as you said. And they were able to measure the processing power of each employee. And it was about $1,000 a day or a month. I can't remember what the sort of lineation time was. But when they then just turned those desks to look out of the window, that productivity tripled and the business made 3,000 per employee.
really,
So for me, it's just such an interesting sort of way of showing how by putting our minds on quite literally turning those eyes to look at things that we had evolved to see, just freed up so much thinking space in our minds that we can do 3 times as much.
yes.
I just think it's a very cool, real objective economic example of how biophilic design and building richness into the environment and mimicking nature can heal. And the more that designers can understand that and research it and be inspired by it, the more they can do for their employees and clients. And that's what Light Tribe and obviously Journal of Biophilic Design, I guess, are trying to mutually do. Mine just being a bit more light focused, I guess.
Fantastic. Well, that's lovely. Thank you. Thanks for the kind words at the beginning there. So, bless you, and thanks for all you're doing as well, because you're really inspiring, like, the next generation of designers and everything, and just really be your energy and everything else, and getting everybody together in the great event that you also put on. So well done to you too. So fantastic. So the final question, Xander, if you could paint the world with a magic brush of biophilia, what would it look like?
I had to think about this. All I could come up with was sort of there were so many, and I was trying to make it a little bit more broad, but I think it's just texture.
Mm.
For me, I just think there's not enough texture out there. I think everything is injection molded, everything is polished, everything is brilliant white, everything is like I think we just need imperfection. Yeah, it's actually like not to get too sort of, philosophical or anything about it, but like Instagram, we're all told to be eating this and doing this and da, da, da. Like nature is just like organized chaos. So we just bring a little bit more madness back into the built environment and have some texture, have some oxidized finishes, have some contrast. Nothing, the red tape that is buried so many quality designs. Just yeah, I mean I was gonna say texture, but I think it's just bring back the chaos, which sort of sounds a bit more like a sort of rock and roll album. But yeah, I think appreciate the imperfections, bring imperfections back into the built environment.
Thank you for listening to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast.